Hi guys, and thanks again for joining me on another episode of Sealed for Good. Today I'm talking about rising damp and residual moisture and what's the difference. Do you know the difference? This one comes up a lot. We get lots of questions in our tech services department, and it comes up on site a lot, even with builders, architects and clients, because dampness is one of these terms that tends to get a little bit bastardized and generalized and used in different contexts. But what is the difference between rising damp and residual moisture? Important for waterproofers and flooring guys to know this, and I know a lot of our flooring customers know this very well. But if we talk about rising damp first, rising damp you're going to find on ground floor slabs. If it's not on the ground floor, it's not rising damp. So ground floor concrete slabs, basement areas where you've got either a rising damp coming upwards or you've got a head of water coming through the other way because there's a source of constant moisture the other way. That is a continuous source of moisture, high water tables, underground streams, poor soil drainage, or even a damaged vapor barrier under a concrete slab, all sources of rising damp. And the common thing that you will always find with rising damp or a very damp underground area are things like mould, mildew, that musty smell, and our salty efflorescent friend that always shows its head somewhere in an ugly area. That is, once you see those signs and symptoms, it's a case of rising damp, and it requires a vapor barrier treatment to stop it. There are numbers of those that are out there, depending on the veracity of the problem, how bad it is, and there are different measures on this. A number of good products on the market. We have a few in our area, but today I'm not giving you a sell job. I'm just trying to explain the difference between rising damp and residual moisture. So when you see dampness, efflorescence, etc., it's a sign of a constant moisture source that's trying to come upwards, and it can happen in both external environments where you might see sometimes concrete edge dampness around slab edges. That's a common one, or obviously in the basements. But more often than not, we see it underneath the flooring and carpets and vinyl internally, from whatever those sources might be. Happens with aged homes a lot, where vapor barriers break down, but also, like we said, if it's damaged in the meantime, sometimes we see it in newer construction. Residual dampness. This is the piece where you need to understand how it affects your job, because residual dampness is often a temporary source of moisture, and it's in the substrate. Now, I refer to multi-story or a second story, where it's a concrete slab, and it could have been a Bondex slab that's recently poured, and obviously the moisture in the concrete has got to escape, and so that's residual moisture. Now, depending on the atmospheric temperature, it will determine how long that residual moisture stays in the concrete. Dry conditions, quicker evaporation of the moisture out of the concrete. High humidity or constant rains is going to slow it down. So, I said previously in another episode about how you can test for levels of moisture, but you need to not run the gauntlet when you've got residual moisture. From where we stand from Gripset's point of view, if you've got a concrete slab that's dry enough to walk over in traffic, and you understand it's gone through its dry cycle, but there's residual moisture there, treat it with a vapor barrier primer, get that piece right, because then you can proceed and you sleep well at night. Internally, it's not so much an issue if you've got residual moisture and you've got a membrane that breathes, or there's another source for that with that concrete slab where the moisture can escape. When you've got a membrane that can handle damp concrete conditions. However, externally is a different situation, like a podium, because and I'll talk about internal because it could be a concrete screed. But when you've got a situation externally and you've got that UV light and sun on there, a membrane that's a vapor barrier that's got residual moisture on there trying to escape, it's going to blister. And so often we hear this where contractors will do a job and they'll go out there in the morning and everything's looking fine, and then they come out in the afternoon when the sun's on it and they're seeing little blisters or mushrooms in their membrane finish. That's a sign that you've got moisture in that substrate and it's trying to escape. And depending on what you are putting on top or how that could impact your membrane, you may need to pull it up and start again, or it may be to handle that if it's temporary, because if there's other areas where the moisture can escape out of that area. But it's important to just get it right from the start and ascertain that. So when you are going over a concrete slab, understand the allowable moisture levels. Most membranes will indicate that on their data sheets, and if it's a robust membrane like our cementitious grades, then they're not so much an issue because they breathe and they handle damp conditions, and so it's a simple one. Avoid the things you need to important to consider with residual dampness. A, it avoids the blistering of membranes, also vinyl floor coverings that don't breathe as well, or the warping of timbers. Okay, because once you have timber that's got residual dampness, because it's not just about concrete, and you coat it, then that timber doesn't handle moisture often, and you start to see the timber warp and move. It might not be visible to the eye, but over time will definitely impact other finishes like textures or tiles, etc. So important to understand where residual moisture lies in the surface that you are applying product over. Alternatively, and now this is probably not going to suit our friends up in the north of Australia like Darwin and North Queensland, or where you've got the real cold humidity in Tassie and some parts of Victoria. But when you've got dry conditions and you've got residual moisture, the best way is when you can allow, if you can, hold off on your job and allow the maximum moisture to escape, because the less residual moisture you've got in the substrate, the smoother run you're going to have in terms of applying your product. If in doubt, ask. Always read a data sheet and check with us if you want. I know a lot of our competitors with their data sheets also have that information on there. Check it out, guys. We're all in the game together here. We're trying to do the right thing. There's nothing uglier than seeing someone criticise a waterproofing job over a bloody thing like residual moisture in the slab on the surface. Let's get it right. Let's do it right and move on to the next one. I'll see you in the next episode.